Hello, and can't cheat on your fiance with a dead girl, right? Welcome to Best of the Rest. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined as always by my co-ghost, Andrew Williams. How are we doing today, Andrew?
You know,
I do know. I know you're literally wearing a hockey jersey as we record, which, to be fair,
this is a hockey hoodie. Thank you.
oh, excuse. All I can see is the top. It's got the lace
Yeah, and
neck
that's
area there.
there's definitely a style that it's aiming for here. Not to be clear,
Well,
but
I know that after this record, you're going to play hockey. I assumed you were
yes.
already geared up. That's not the case.
Yeah, I just drive to hockey fully geared up. That's how I do it. Yeah,
I mean, you have a helmet on top of your head. You're just about to slide it down over your face as soon as we're
yeah.
done
It's just that's how it works, man.
here. Oh boy, Andrew, I shared with everyone recently my troubles with my cell phone.
Yes,
Specifically,
indeed.
that it fell out of my pocket during a ride at Six Flags. I went a full week without a cell phone, which is hard to do this day and age.
That
It's
is
been
nuts, man.
it's been corrected. I have a new phone. We're all good there. But that week without a phone, I, I tell you, I listened to the radio in my car, which I don't know about you, I haven't done in years. I mean, ever since. I mean, I was definitely all about the aux whenever, uh, like as soon as our phones were capable of like streaming, not even streaming. I used to just carry my music collection on my phone, my
Yeah.
CD collection. Ever since then, I've been all about playing music from my phone in my car. And then I get into podcasts at some point. I mean, I don't listen to the radio. I think my last car, I got a new vehicle recently. My last car, I'm not even sure I ever programmed like favorites, like save
Yeah,
stations.
yeah.
So
I
anyway,
know I haven't done that forever. Yeah.
I listened to the radio, listening to XM or what's Sirius XM radio because you get like 3 months free or whatever. So I still have my free trial. Here's my question, Andrew. Here's what I want to ask you. What percentage of people that listen to Sirius XM have access to Sirius XM via a free trial from a new vehicle?
78%.
78%. The vast majority, you think,
Yeah.
are on that free trial. I was guessing more like maybe 60%, 60-40, but definitely I agree more than half. But that doesn't sound like a sustainable business model. Like there's got to be people out there listening to Sirius that pay for it, right?
Yeah, I know there's definitely people that just have it. I'm sure there's people that uh I knew somebody once that just forgot they were subscribed to it and kept paying for it.
Fair.
I know that
I think
definitely
every
happens.
streaming service has a good 4 or 5% of people that don't know they're subscribed to it or paying for it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm looking at the literal even the right now you can do like an all access plan that's $2 for 3 months, and then it's 25 a month. But
$25 a month?
yeah,
Oh, that's more than like any. That's more than
that's car
Spotify,
plus
YouTube
streaming.
Music.
So that's car plus streaming. So that gets you the car. If you want just
Okay.
streaming, so if you want basically just the app, it's $10 a month. So it's
Which
actually
you can
more
connect to your
expensive.
vehicle.
Yeah, it's more expensive to do it through your car. And I guess that's because you have to upkeep the infrastructure in order to do that, but or versus the app where you just throw it up on the app and it's fine. But yeah, I don't know. And I know that there's all sorts of stuff. I had it for a while. I think when I bought my Dodge, I got like a trial. And so I was actually listening to it for a while. And yeah, there's some interesting stuff out there, but by the end of it, yeah, I use my phone for like all my music now. I'm like, why would I listen to Chance on the radio when I could listen to the exact same 8 songs again and again and again, curated by me?
I mean, I didn't hate listening to it. I found like a good 90s alternative. All like the stand up channels are fun.
Yeah.
Although I find myself, because like you can list like your saved stations and it tells you at any given time the artist that's on every station. So I found myself like constantly scanning the stations to see if something better was on at any given time, even if I liked what was playing. So I don't know. I like it, but there's no way I would pay for it or take it over just being able to listen to whatever the hell I want on my phone. It's got to be like an older crowd. It's got to be like, I mean this in a literal sense, not the insulting sense, like boomers, like older people that grew up on the radio and just want like a good ad-free radio. Because you look at the station, there's like a Bob Dylan station, there's like a Tom Petty and the Heartbreaker station. I feel like it's maybe geared towards older generations.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, and there's newer stations too. I don't want to imply there's not. Like the one I always remembered listening to was like Ozzy's Boneyard, which was just like a metal station. And like,
but Andrew,
there's all sorts
Ozzy Osbourne is not. I mean, old people listen to Ozzy Osbourne.
You're right. I listen to old people music, so I have no barometer for what newer people listen to. I have the musical tastes of a 60-year-old man and the reading habits of an 80-year-old woman. Like, what do you want me to do?
I'm laughing because I know this is true about you, Andrew. Well, Andrew, we're not here to talk about radio, although, as we've also talked about, best of the rest, there's Sirius XM subscribers or maybe free trialers that are listening to our podcast. There's been a significant bump in listeners listening to us through Sirius XM. So if that's you, thank you. Also, please write in and tell us why you choose to do what you do. But we're not here to talk about the radio. Every week, we take a second look at a movie that was poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's Ghost Month, and this week we are talking the 2002 film Ghost Ship. Andrew, what is your history with this movie? Did you see this one back in the day? Is this something you've revisited much over the years?
I have not. I did not see it in theaters like when it came out. It was 2002. I was 15, so don't get me wrong. I'm sure that I was intended to. I was probably meant to be the target audience.
It's a scary movie with boobs. I think you were the exact audience.
Like I said, there's a definite scene in this movie that I know as a youth I would have enjoyed. And then it takes a very strange turn. But no, so I didn't see it in theaters. But definitely came to it later. I think I heard some friends kind of talking about that intro. Obviously, we'll talk about it in a bit. But checked it out. And yeah, it's been, I would say that I watch it, probably not every year for Halloween, but it's definitely come back up again. So I wasn't a stranger to it, but was definitely excited to dive back into it for the show.
Well, this was my first time watching this movie beginning to end. I think I shared on a previous episode that I had seen the beginning of this movie, not on YouTube or as a meme or recently, but like back in the day, like we rented it. And for whatever reason, I can't remember why, like I only watched the beginning and then I had to like leave or something. I don't know, but I saw the beginning and it always stuck with me. And I never got back around to it. I don't know, but I liked that intro. I really like the poster for this. It's pretty, I mean, it's cheesy and definitely throwbacky, which is obviously intentional. We'll get into like the production company who we've been talking about all month. But yeah, the stern of the ship with the big skull on it looks really cool. I'm a sucker for a good tagline. This one is great. See evil. SEA evil. Short, simple, sweet. Love it. Love a good tagline. But never watched the whole movie until this week, preparing for this episode. And Andrew, I've got some thoughts. We're going to get into it. But first, let's set the stage a little bit. Go back to when this movie was released. October 25th, 2002. Halloween season. Made on a budget of $20 million. At the box office, it brought in $68.3 million. We're not breaking records there, but we're making a nice return on our $20 million budget. Critically, however, it's panned by critics. It holds just a 15% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. Audience score is a little higher, as you would imagine, but still not anything glowing over there.
No, certainly not a huge response. Literally a 15%. That is
a little rough. 120%, hard to do.
Yeah, and it's not like, and it's another one where like, It's 128 reviews. It is a decent sample size, getting us to that 15%. Now, that is 3 out
17?
of 20.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, and then like I said, the audience score, they call it the popcorn meter now, which I hate. I hate every bit of that. 37%. So still the audience is a little kinder to it, but still obviously not like some sitting in the 50s, the 60s, where there's kind of like this clear fan base that's kind of rallying for it. Even the fans are still, like I said, they're still under 40%. So I have heard people go to bat for this. I have heard people say that they think it's got some cool stuff going on, that they like it, but that it's definitely not something getting a big renaissance.
We have a couple of writers credited. First one is Mark Hanlon. And Andrew, I gotta say, doing this podcast, diving into these creative voices behind these movies, we come across a lot of writers and often directors that I've never heard of, like until I'm diving in. And I always get this little snippet into someone's career, and it's just so fascinating. Mark Hanlon, again, a name I had never heard of before, but you look at what they're responsible for. They're just an all-around filmmaker. They've done a little bit of everything. In 2016, they have an Emmy nomination for a documentary they directed called A Strange Relativity. The writer of Ghost Ship, 14 years later, gets an Emmy nomination for directing a prestige documentary. It's just wild to me how you
unexpected
connect those dots. Cool. I mean, this is it's awesome to be able to kind of run the table like that on the creative side, but very cool. Something similar going on here with our other writer, John Pogue. Previously had written U.S. Marshals and The Skulls. Also writes Rollerball, the remake, which got to be an episode of this podcast one day, and is the director of the 2022 film Eraser Reborn. Andrew, they rebooted Eraser. It was straight to video in the US, so if you haven't heard of it, that's probably why, but I had no idea that existed. Like, to me, that's obscure is not the right word, but it's a, a lesser Arnold movie, especially from the 90s. So interesting property to go back to, but a writer of Ghost Ship got to direct that.
Yeah, just directed it though. Didn't write it, which is interesting. Also directed, like you said, out of Deep Blue Sea 3, which today I learned there's a Deep Blue Sea 3. Right. Directed wrote and directed Quarantine 2 Terminal, which is the Quarantine sequel that takes place on a plane.
Which Quarantine itself is a remake of I don't remember the original movie, but it's a remake of a foreign film.
It's a remake of a Spanish film called Wreck.
I really like Quarantine. You ever seen Quarantine?
I have.
The first one? That was pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like
he's also
found footage zombie, so like we're not breaking new ground, but it's executed very well.
Does its job. Also responsible for a trilogy of films he writes a movie called The Skulls, and then there are 2 sequels to The Skulls that he produced. It's clearly a career spent largely in the horror adjacent genre. Couple of high profile-ish directing gigs, but now seems to kind of settled into that direct to DVD environment, and it works. Now, oddly, he does have uncredited revisions on the original Eraser, and I wonder if that's what leads to him directing Eraser Reborn full on 26 years later. Adds a bunch of unmade projects too, but overall an interesting career. But yeah, that Rollerball remake is certainly another movie that I really hope you don't put me through.
Andrew, you mentioned the phrase direct to DVD earlier, and we all know what you mean by that, but like that's not really the case anymore. Usually it's straight to digital or streaming. But you know what phrase that I hear sometimes and I get hung up on is VOD. Video on demand. You hear this? You hear this a lot?
All streaming video is video on demand.
Yeah, I mean, it's just another term for what we're talking about here.
It doesn't make any sense, yeah.
But Video on demand. I mean, to me, that I'm thinking like, remember like when cable or satellite first got the ability to like, you could watch HBO shows when you wanted. Like, it wasn't internet, it wasn't streaming, but you could like go into the menu.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I thought of video on demand, but it's still a term that's used. But here's my question. It's real simple, Andrew. What is video? Here's what I mean by that. When I hear video, I think of like VHS. If I hear something is shot on video, I'm thinking, oh, it's poor quality. It's shot straight to physical film as opposed to the digital. That's what I think of when I hear the word video. So the term video on demand is very strange to me because it's not talking about my association with the word video. So what is video, Andrew?
I mean, I would assume in the scenario of video on demand, it's basically referring to literally anything that has been shot by a motion camera ever.
Anything,
but
it's accurate to call it video?
No, but at the same time, like, I don't know, like, you know, like you said, when you bought a movie on video, you bought a tape.
Right.
You bought a VHS. Like, so in my, like, you know, and VHS was literally video home system. That's what it stood for.
Home video, yeah.
Yeah, home video. So, like, I do definitely probably first off, Chris, I've never thought about this before ever.
I never have either until honestly this popped in my brain a few days ago. I'm like, I have to ask Andrew. I'm not going to research this. I'm not going to Google the definition for video. I'm going to find a way to ask Andrew, and here it is.
Excuse me. Video record. Yeah, I guess video is probably something on magnetic tape, which is a VHS was. Like they were. That's why if you put magnets next to VHSs, it could erase them. Yeah, I don't know. Like it's. Yeah, when I hear video, I'm clearly thinking of like a tape. Like that's in like, you know, you think of like a VCR. It's a video cassette recorder / playback. It's a tape. It's a tape you're putting in there. Like it's. But at the same time, DVD, digital video disc. I mean,
digital video. So digital video. So is video the moving image? That seems
video.
Too broad.
Yeah, that seems too broad. But I guess they were also I guess DVD was something else. But like, yeah, and then like Blu-ray disc was clearly when we kind of removed.
That's just a proprietary name. But Sony
yeah, it's just a format. It's and it's just it's literally Blu-ray is just, it's not even, Blu-ray is just the thing it is. It's not like at the same time, I guess VHS or videotape is just what the thing was. Like you were watching a movie on a videotape. Like it's not like you were whatever. So, man, dude, I can't do this. I can't. I can't. Like
I sat down to talk about a ghost movie. What are we doing?
I'm talking about See Evil, not. No, like so. I mean, like you know, you think of like Blockbuster Video. Like video, it was the tapes. That was the whole point.
Right.
And like obviously, I know they eventually did have DVDs and probably Blu-rays before they managed to finally collapse. But yeah, I don't. Man, that's such a weird thing. Video on demand, like I get it, but like,
so should it be digital video on demand? DVOD, DVOD? Would that be more accurate? Digital video?
No, that would just piss me off even more.
It's all stupid.
It's like we've added that. That would be like, say, your video on demand platform had a very simple 4-letter name, and you decided to change it to increasingly longer verbiages until you just settled on calling it a still longer name. That would be absolutely ridiculous and a complete waste of everybody's time, and there's no way anybody would do it.
I know not everyone is following you on this, Andrew, but the thing about Vudu changing its name to Fandango at Home is I feel like we are past the time of Fandango having any cachet. That was a movie ticketing platform that no one uses anymore. Like, right? I mean,
everybody buys tickets through the theater's own website now.
Unless your grandma got you a gift card and it sits in your wallet for 6 months, then you remember to buy a movie ticket on. That's the only time I'm ever on Fandango.
Right.
I actually like the app Atom Tickets. That's my preferred. But yeah, or straight to the theater.
If I'm going to like Alamo I have AMC A-List, so like I have to do that through AMC's app.
Right.
But like, yeah, if I go to Alamo, like I have to do that through Alamo's app. Like, And I guess the reason I do that, Adam, I guess, does Alamo tickets. I don't know.
I
But
don't think so.
but I have seen issues where like I was actually at Alamo once, and two people had tickets for the same spot because somebody had bought them through a thing, and somebody else I guess had bought them in the theater, and they did it at like the same time.
And they had to sit in each other's lap.
Yeah, they did. They actually brought up seats to put in front of those ones so that they were all technically sitting in the same spot.
It's just like
because
bunk
they couldn't
seats.
waver.
They have like a seat on stilts above them.
So me sitting behind them, it was terrible. It was the worst. But yeah, I almost it's AMC or Alamo basically. If I go to anything else, it's going to be some weird like art house theater. Like I've mentioned Music Box Theater a few times. You have to buy those through Music Box's website.
Yeah,
there's no other way to do it. So, yeah, but I don't know. It feels like that's another video is kind of one of those just not lost terms, but just like it's a relic of a different time. Kind of like when we take like a concept, like, you know, video was the thing, and then video over time became to define what was on the thing, not the thing itself. You think about like what is, you know, a film? Like what is film?
Like Andrew, you already said we can't do this, and now we're going.
So no, I'm sorry. Now it's
is film the physical thing that you use to record it, or is
film the thing you're watching?
A movie
is the movie the film? Is the film the thing? The answer is yes. So video, I guess, is the same way. It is all things at once.
It is at one time the thing we recorded it on, but became synonymous with the production that was used with the thing.
It's like when a name brand becomes susceptible for what the product is, like Band-Aid. Like Kleenex, Band-Aid is a brand name, but everybody makes adhesive healing or bandage strips. But Band-Aid became the determinate thing. Yeah. So I don't know. Chris, get us out of here.
We got a movie to talk about. Let's go. Hit the music.
I got places to be.
While celebrating their latest haul in a bar, Sean Murphy's salvage crew is approached by pilot Jack Ferryman, who tells them about an abandoned ship he spotted in the Bering Sea. The crew agree to bring the ship to port and bring Jack along for the excursion. Once on board the ship, they discover a fortune on board and learn about the ship's violent history. But once the crew begin seeing apparitions, they decide it's best to escape the sinking ship while they still can. But Jack isn't going to let them escape, for he is actually a servant of hell tasked with bringing souls to the underworld. What a late stage twist we have in this movie. Sorry to spoil it if you've never seen it before, but that was wild. I mentioned I had seen the beginning of this movie, the opening scene. Based on my knowledge of this movie, that is not where I expected the movie to go. I did not see it coming.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild, out there twist that #PP you could say the movie doesn't quite set up for.
Well, we'll get into it. We'll talk about the scenes and how it ends up in that finale. But first, we are going to talk about this cast, starting with the high point. Best casting, best performance of the movie, because every episode, we recognize one person who goes so far above and beyond the call of duty that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance. We recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, kick us off. Who is getting your Mark Strong Award for Ghost Ship?
I am going to go with one of our slightly lesser characters. Maybe not necessarily one of the leads, but I will be going with fan favorite Karl Urban as Munder. You can talk about we've talked about, sometimes, we talked about it on 13 Ghosts, that, like, Matthew Lillard understands the assignment. If there's anybody in this movie that's kind of, I think, closest to understanding the assignment, I think it's definitely Karl Urban. He's definitely somebody that has his doubts about what's happening, especially as things start to go wrong. Gets to get as part of, unfortunately, one of the probably second most memorable scenes in the movie. And then meets a very unfortunate end, a crushing end, you might say. But it's a fun performance. He's clearly just playing slightly dim-witted sidekick. That's really all
Sure.
it really is. But he's doing a great job at it. This is obviously pretty early on in his career. Lord of the Rings, I guess, is the same year as this, which is so odd to think about.
Carl Urban is in Lord of the Rings, Andrew? I don't know if I knew this.
Yes, he is.
What does he do in Lord of the Rings?
He's a character named Eomer. He's not a main character, but he's
okay.
Okay. Obviously, stuff like Star Trek is coming much later. Even stuff like Doom is several years after this, and certainly way before things like The Boys or any of that coming along. But it's a fun performance, and he's doing what he needs to do for it. And as such, I don't know if we've talked about Karl Urban before.
I'm sure we have. I just don't know if we've covered him on the podcast. I'm sure we just found ways to talk about Karl Urban because Karl Urban is cool. I'm sure when we talked about Judge Dredd, we inevitably talked about Karl Urban in Dredd. Sure. Yeah. It's interesting that it's a young Karl Urban, or it's before he became Karl Urban, and it's so weird because Karl Urban in The Boys, or even his small role in Thor Ragnarok, or even his chin in Dredd. You see him now, you see him in Star Trek, you're like, yeah, that's Karl Urban. That's like a movie star. That's like look at that guy. You see him here, he just looks like some dude. Like, I don't know, like it looks like Karl Urban. I recognize him, but like he doesn't have the aura of a movie star yet. I don't know what it is. But you can sense it. It's weird to go back and see this early performance from him, but I agree, it's a lot of fun. I mean, speaking of fun, he seems to be having the most fun out of anybody like on the salvage crew. His character seems to be having the most fun, and Karl Urban himself seems to be having fun on set, which is always infectious, and you always want that in a movie like this. Obviously this is like a horror movie, a supernatural movie, but just like we're talking about last week with 13 Ghosts, and I related that to like Cabin in the Woods. There's definitely a vein of horror movie where like it's meant to be maybe a little spooky, a little jump scare, but fun, and you want to have characters having fun, and Karl Urban is certainly bringing that here. And Andrew, I gotta respect the Mark Strong Award pick because it's a good time. Now I am going to be giving my Mark Strong Award to someone else, someone that I think is really bringing it, someone who has a lot of weight on their shoulders versus the certain amount of exposition they have to carry and provide here. It's going to be Emily Browning as Katie Harwood. This is the young girl in the movie. She has a key scene in the beginning, the opening scene we'll talk about. She, as an alive human, sees a lot of people get murdered around her, and it's pretty freaky. And then as a ghost, she gets to be like the good ghost on board the ship that's trying to warn our salvage crew of the evil that lurks on board. So we see her playing a few different shades, from like sweet innocent girl to horrified to kind of badass who likes to like stick her neck out, trying to help these people, and ultimately get saved by the end. It's good. Like when we first see her as a ghost, they're obviously going for the like evil, scary, spooky kid, like the Red Queen or Resident Evil or Omen type thing, where like this is like a freaky looking kid, but
Shining, what have you?
Yeah, exactly. But then you see, she starts kind of talking and explaining things to come around, and you see like she is in fact a friendly ghost. So I think she's got a few different shades to play. I think she does a good job holding her own amongst obviously grown professional actors. Didn't drop the ball whatsoever. Has memorable scenes and is really holding up her deal. I think if this were a weak point, if this was not a stronger performance, the entire film would suffer for it. But since it is a strong performance, it elevates the movie in the vein of the Mark Strong Award.
Hey, I think this is a good pick. It's a tough spot to sit in, and like you said, this is a role that certainly similar movies in the past have criticized the actors usually put in roles like this because they don't think they're up to snuff. They don't think they're quite up to taking on the task, and I think that she is. So yeah, I think this is a very good pick, and it speaks to how important that role is, because you do get it's interesting that some of the I mean, obviously the ship is full of ghosts. It's full of ghosts. There are so
It's
many.
a ghost ship, you could say.
It's a ship full of ghosts. The ship itself is not a ghost. Chris, we
Can you
had this
imagine if they
discussion.
call this ship full of ghosts?
That would have been so
That's
funny.
stupid.
I'm sorry. Like, ship full of ghosts. Well, it's a ship full of ghosts. 10 out of 10. Because there are other ghosts, obviously, clearly are being very malevolent, but there's other ghosts, like the captain eventually shows up later, and he's also trying to be helpful. So it really does depend, but she's kind of our lead kind of connection to the ghosts, and she does a good job with that. Still out there acting. I thought that was pretty cool. Still appearing in shows, movies. Recently was a lead actress on American Gods over the Neil Gaiman adaptation, but still out there doing her thing, which I think is very cool. Typically, not shocking to see these characters or these actors kind of fade away from acting as they get older, and she's stuck with it. So cool.
Shortly after this was in Darkness Falls. Remember that, Andrew? The Tooth Fairy horror film. I saw that in theaters. I will never forget it.
That is written by a guy named Joe Harris, and I know who he is. He writes comics too.
And then maybe her most high-profile role to date, being in Lemony Snicket, the movie, the Jim Carrey one. She's the one of the leads in that.
She is also the lead in Sucker Punch, which I don't know if that's more high profile or not.
No, it's not. I don't think so. I think Lemony Snicket is more high profile than Sucker Punch.
Is it though? Like, is anybody talking about Jim Carrey's Lemony Snicket? Are they though?
I think that movie was a hit, a successful. It's based on a very popular series of books. I think it's remembered quite fondly. Andrew.
Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen was a hit, Chris, and nobody talks about it.
But you would still say that's a bigger movie than Sucker Punch, wouldn't you?
I don't know.
Okay, all right. You're just being.
Sucker Punch has its fans, and but I never hear anybody talk about Jim Carrey's
Sucker
Lemony
Punch
Snicket
has
movie.
its fans, Andrew.
Okay, Sucker Punch has its fan, but it's
Zack Snyder, the man that made it, is the one championing it, and he's the only one that saw it in theaters. He bought 12 tickets.
Hey.
Sorry,
hashtag. Jesus,
sorry,
man,
sorry.
just gutted
that,
man.
Sorry, sorry for talking so negatively about what is inevitably going to be like an anniversary episode of this podcast.
Yeah. Anyway,
Gabriel Byrne is in this movie, Andrew, as Sean Murphy, which is they kept saying his name throughout the movie, and it was really throwing me because that is the titular good doctor in the series The Good Doctor, of which I've talked about here before. I'm a big fan. But it's all about Dr. Sean Murphy. And so every time they said Sean Murphy, I thought of Freddie Highmore, but Freddie Highmore is not in this film. We have Gabriel Byrne, who, first about his performance. He does a good job. He is, honestly, I was waiting for him to maybe have like a dark side or evil side or push his team too far or whatever, but he seems like a good boss, a good leader. Does not make Dallas alive. It seems like a good dude throughout. I could not place this guy's face. I still don't know where exactly he seemed familiar. I don't know where I recognize him from, but you know what I think it was, Andrew? I think maybe I'm just confusing him with...
Oh, God. Don't do it.
I'm not even about... You gotta help me remember his name. The guy from the Hellboy that we covered. He's in the John Wick films.
Ian McShane? Are you
Ian
kidding
McShane.
me?
He looks like Ian McShane.
No,
there
he doesn't.
Yes, he
My
does.
God.
And he is going to be in the John Wick spin-off Ballerina. So, you know what? He might be playing Ian McShane's brother for all we know.
Oh, God, I hope not. I don't want you to be validated like that. I think I probably oddly associate him most with End of Days, where Gabriel Byrne plays Satan, basically. Like, he's the villain of End of Days.
Speaking of other Arnold movies from the 90s.
Yeah, he's also in a weird horror movie called Spider, directed by David Cronenberg, that features my favorite, Ralph Fiennes, who plays the titular Spider. Not an actual spider, unfortunately. I would have loved to see a movie where Ralph Fiennes plays a spider, but unfortunately, we've not quite gotten there yet as a people. But yeah, Gabriel Byrne's been everywhere. Like obviously, more recently, people know him probably from things like Hereditary. Um, any shows that he's been on recently? I don't know. He's the kind of a big character actor that just you probably know him from something. He was in the remake of Assault on Precinct 13. He was in Stigmata. He was an Enemy of the State. Like, he was in The Man in the Iron Mask they made in the late 90s that had Leonardo DiCaprio in it. He played D'Artagnan, one of the Musketeers. But also The Usual Suspects, I guess, probably maybe the biggest thing he's probably known for by most film buffs. He's basically one of the leads of that movie, too. So, and nobody else. Nobody else is in The Usual Suspects with Gabriel Byrne. But yeah, just been everywhere, done everything, been all around, but looks nothing like Ian McShane.
I'm on Google Images right now, and
no,
you disagree.
You are wrong. It's fine. You're allowed to be wrong. It's. I'm not holding it against you, but no.
Juliana Margulies plays Maureen Epps. Arguably the lead of the film, I would say. Probably gets the most screen time. A lot of it's told through, from her point of view. She bonds with my Mark Strong Award winner, the character of Katie Harwood. She sees her, and they end up talking, and she kind of learns the dealio about what's going on with this ship. But while I wouldn't say she's certainly no scream queen or anything like that, her role is to kind of be scared and chased by the ghosts. Gets to have the final confrontation with Jack in the finale of this film, comes out ahead on that. But we get the final ending tease where we see that maybe the fight isn't quite over. So I think in a lot of regards, this is, if not a thankless role, certainly not the meatiest. She kind of just has to be scared most of the time from all the spooky stuff, but certainly up to the task. At this point in her career, by far most known for her role on ER throughout the 90s, huge hit show. And this is sort of the beginning of her transition into movies.
Yeah, there was definitely a vested effort in the aughts for her to transition into films, but probably definitely most known for television. I mean, she was on ER. I believe she was the lead on The Good Wife, and then now was on the morning show for the last couple of seasons. So a lot of high profile television stuff. And then, like you said, had some jumps into films. Don't know how successful they were in the grand scheme of things, but this is definitely that era where, like, if you were on ER, there was definitely an attempt to spin you into being a movie star. Sure. There was some other guy that was on ER that started going into the movies. I think it was George something. I don't really remember, but didn't work out well for him either. So
next we have Ron Eldard playing a character named Dodge. Most of his scenes, I feel like, are alongside your Mark Strong Award winner, Karl Urban's Munder. They're sort of the entire crew was like hands-on with what they got to do, but they might be getting their hands at the dirtiest. Definitely playing off each other in a lot of lighthearted or fun scenes. They get to, again, we talked about Karl Urban having the most fun. The two of them get to have some key scenes, and he's even got he's one of the last to get killed, so he survives quite a bit. Gets to have some key scenes with our villain towards the end of this movie. And Ron Eldard is an alum of the show. He was in Deep Impact. And I had to Google, I was like, who was he in Deep Impact? He is the astronaut that gets blinded and has the very touching conversation with his family back on Earth, which you and I talking about that scene, we had a lot of praise to say about that and his performance. So, based on these two movies that I'm aware of, Malone, fantastic actor.
Yeah, really good stuff. I gotta give him credit. It doesn't look like he's done a whole lot of other stuff, unfortunately. But yeah, that is a heck of a thing. Although I am seeing that he was in a very weird crime thriller film called Poker Night, where the poster is wild. It's got this thing with a black mask with a stitching over the mouth. I'm gonna have to look that up, man. Anyway,
now I have to see this. Hang on.
Yeah.
Everyone, hang on. I have to look at this. Hang on.
Yeah, it's 2014.
Look at that thing. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
like what the heck? I have no idea what's happening, so I'm gonna need to look this up.
Is that like a wall? It kind of looks like a walrus, doesn't it?
Don't make me think of Tusk. Yeah, I don't know, man. I imagine what this is going to be like is there's another movie I watched recently called Let's Scare Julie. I'd like you to look up the poster for that as well.
Let's Scare Julia?
Julie, yes.
Julie. Let's Scare Julie. Poster. All right, I'm seeing like a...
Like the neon thing?
Neon thing? Yeah, it kind of reminds me like The Purge.
Yeah, so I saw this poster, and the movie was on sale. I think it might have been in a Fanflix, and I was like, oh, hey. And the whole thing is they play a prank on this girl, and it goes terribly, terribly wrong. And I was like, oh, we're looking at like a situation where we try to prank somebody, but it turns out that person was prepped for the prank, come back. No, it's a very strange single-shot horror film.
Okay.
And it's one of the most tedious things I've ever watched. But it's truly, honestly, like the movie opens with like a 20-minute conversation between like 6 girls in a bedroom with like no coverage, with no anything, because it's single shot. And I was like,
yeah,
I don't know if I could do this, guys. So, but that mask, unfortunately, also features in the film very little, actually. So I fear that this movie Poker Night, despite having this awesome dude in a mask, will not be what I think it is, because
Andrew,
rarely are things.
I'm on the Wikipedia page for Poker Night, released in the UK as The Joker. I wonder whether they'll change it. 2014 thriller, written directed by Greg Francis. Are you ready for this? Released to video on demand on December 5th, 2014. Andrew, I'm sorry to bring this up again. I clicked on the link. Wikipedia, there's a link to click on the video on demand page. Are you ready for this, Andrew? Video on demand is a media distribution system that allows users to access videos, television shows, and films digitally on request. Videos and films are separate. Videos and films are released. Video on demand is a media distribution system. I am more confused now. I feel like we ended... Guys, Andrew's head is on his desk. He's not even near his microphone. I feel like we ended at a pretty comfortable spot with this conversation, so I'm sorry to bring it back up, but I am now more confused than ever on what the hell video on demand means and what video means. Because when it says access videos, all of a sudden I think of YouTube, right? Hey, watch this video on YouTube. But that's digital. That's not shot. Yeah, I thought all my associations with video were like VHS and tape, but that's not true because I call things on YouTube videos.
Chris, I'm not quantifying this conversation with a statement.
Oh boy.
I'm not doing it. I refuse to do it.
Let's talk about Desmond Harrington. He plays a character named Jack, right? He's the guy that hires the crew to go onto this ship. He ends up being the bad guy. And we find out that he, works for the devil, essentially, and he's got a crew, his quota of souls, before taking them to the underworld. And the character's name is Jack Ferryman. Ferryman. What's funny about that is he presumably could have chose any name he wanted, and he just wanted to be a little cheeky guy and make his name.
I think he was specifically taunting the people and being like, "Ah! Idiots."
He does a good, I'm not expecting him to be the ultimate villain, so he does a good job playing he seems kind of squirrely, kind of squeamish, kind of not up for the task early on. And then he seems oddly not shaken by the dead bodies they find. That's maybe your first clue that something's going on with this guy. And then it's revealed that he's an eternal being who was on the ship.
Interestingly enough, I think there's actually an earlier tell that something might be up with him. When they find the gold, he's laughing, almost uncontrollably when the characters find the gold. the whole premise of the kind of descent into madness that the previous crews have fallen to. So when they find the gold, he actually is literally laughing about it because I think he knows that he's got it. It's just that was interesting. Looking back, just seeing that weird little, because in the moment you think he's just laughing because he's like hysterical at the fact that they found hundreds of millions of dollars of gold and he just can't believe it. But looking back, you're like, oh, it's because you know what's about to happen to these people now.
Isaiah Washington plays Greer. Now, his character is involved in some pretty memorable scenes in this movie that I'm excited to talk about. Not as excited to talk about Isaiah Washington, who's perhaps most known for his role on Grey's Anatomy and getting fired from that show for his homophobic comments that he kind of just doubled down on and then has taken a really weird path politically after that. Not worth getting into. Just seems like a guy that I don't want to talk about.
Yeah. I agree.
But Alex Dimitriadis as Santos, I would like to talk about. This guy, just like Karl Urban, seems to be having a good time. Now, you made the right call going Karl Urban from Mark Strong Award, because Santos dies pretty early. He doesn't have a lot of screen time, but he is in the the engine room for the most part of their tugboat and meets an unfortunate death whenever the propane tanks or gas tanks of some kind, the cylinders are unscrewed by an unseen force, and then when they try to start up the boat, it explodes. Pretty large explosion, and he is killed in the process. But I love his scene where he comes back as a ghost, or at least his soul is being used by Jack, I think, to torment Sean Murphy. That's probably my favorite scene of his. He gets to really push his buttons and has that gnarly makeup on from getting blown to bits, which, you know, I would hope if I die a gruesome death, I hope my ghost does not reflect like my last image of my body, you know?
You would hope. I'm not really familiar with the science, and I haven't really studied this myself,
Right.
given that I'm alive. Yeah.
Sure. Monday.
Sorry. Jesus. Took a turn. But
A long time from now, Andy.
Jesus,
Long
I mean,
after
that
we
took-
record
that took-
episode 500 on Last Airbender.
Folks, there's been an
Long
accident
after
after
that.
episode 499. No. Yeah, I don't. I mean, you think about, like, you know, the Star Wars of it all. You know, when Darth Vader looks like young Anakin, not old Anakin, because that's how he remembers himself. So by Star Wars rules, he would not look that way, unless, I guess, the final image he has of himself is when he dies in the explosion. But also, he's oddly put together for having died in an explosion. But we're not going to think about that now. Anyway, you are right. This is probably his best scene. It is, like you said, he kind of is this kind of mechanic that's just along for the ride, just making his quips, making his jokes, not in the movie a whole lot. Then that scene with Gabriel Byrne, he really gets to dial up the chops a little bit and gets to be much more menacing and a lot more sinister, and he pulls it off.
Andrew, I think there's just one more person we have to talk about. We have to talk about Francesca Ritondini as Francesca. Yeah, she gets to just keep her name. She's an Italian actress and seemingly pretty well known in Italy, but this is about her only Hollywood feature that I can see in her work. She is the singer we see in the introduction of this movie and throughout the film as a ghost. Her role is to be stunning on film, and that she is, right? She's like the centerpiece of that opening scene. Her character's song is playing. It's a different person providing the voice. So like Francesca is literally just there to be stunning. And as a ghost, she seduces one of the crew. She even gets to be nude for a moment, we mentioned earlier. So like she's there to be stunning, and it makes her gnarly death scene we see in the flashback that much more shocking and jarring to see this character who's been lauded for her beauty throughout to have this giant hook through her jaw is pretty wild. Uh, just very memorable. I just want to shout her out because just a very memorable part of this movie, and we'll talk about her more, I'm sure, as we talk about the scene, especially that opening scene. As I mentioned, though, she's an Italian actress, and just kind of just throwing through her Wikipedia and credits and stuff, I saw that she was involved in a boat accident in 2012.
Not just a boat accident, like a cruise ship accident.
Yeah, like
not just like she was out in a yacht with some guy. Like this is straight up like, yeah, on a giant cruise ship.
A packed liner had a collision, and I'm not making 32 people died, many more were injured. I'm not making it like light or being like, ooh, isn't it creepy? I just think it's a wild coincidence. So someone that's so memorable from this movie is involved in that crash. She was there for work. They're filming a show, or the crew was out or whatever. But involved in a very, very serious shipwreck. And the captain of that ship, Francesco. His name's Francesco.
Interesting. Yeah, it's one of those things, Andrew. Let's talk about this movie. Let's talk about the scenes, and you know what we're going to do. We're going to start with the best scene of the film, or at least our personal favorite. So, Andrew, in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What's the best scene in Ghost Ship? We all know what the best scene in Ghost Ship is, man.
Of course we do.
It's so backhanded to say this, but the best scene in Ghost Ship is the intro scene. It is the first scene of the movie. It is the scene
1000%.
featuring the first appearance of the character we just talked about, Francesca. It is the intro. It is 1962. There are passengers aboard this Italian ocean liner, the MS Antonia Grazia. Bunch of people are having a dance. Francesca's performing a song, Senza Fine. Katie sits alone off to the side till the captain comes up and offers to dance with her. And then as everybody's having a good time, they're drinking, they're having a great old time. Some mystery hand lifts a lever that starts tightening up this metal cable using some turbine on the ship. And then that cable breaks, slides across this entire group of people on this dance floor. And, you know, we talk about scenes where people don't realize this has happened. Obviously talked about it with
13 Ghosts last week.
Well, I was trying to think of the first one, Resident Evil.
Yes.
Obviously last week with 13 Ghosts. And it happens with a bunch of people here. It's actually a very unsettling realization. The way they handle this, I think, is superb. This is like a perfect, like, short horror film. Like, if this were literally just the film, it would have, like, been fine. You could have just left it here. But reminds me that, like, you can do that. Like, you know, we have a little bit of a discussion earlier about whether Jaws is a horror film, and I would say the first 5 minutes of Jaws is a horror film. Don't know that I'd say the rest of it is, but that first 5 minutes definitely is. But you know, the way that all unfolds, and this is very similar. Like, and you're kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop as the viewer. Like, you're kind of like, oh, well, this is well, what's going to happen? What's going on with this? You guys see this? What's the deal here? You seen this? You heard about this? And so obviously Francesca's singing this song. She looks amazing. She's putting on this performance. And then, like I said, just out of nowhere, slice through everybody, and just the way this unfolds, like because everybody's kind of standing, like, what? Okay, all right.
Eyes. No one's moving, but like eyes shift. People kind of look around. People are kind of
like, it's like that thing where like they all realize something has just happened, but they're not entirely sure what. And then slowly but surely, the people just start falling apart. Like there's like a moment where like the guy's foot is like on the bridge, and you see blood start like spilling down from his leg. And I was like, whoa. Like I wouldn't have even thought that, like, and like the way it just unfolds, the realization is people just start falling apart. Like the upper halves are like reaching for people's lower halves. There's like a hand that's still spasming even though it's separated from somebody's body. And this poor girl, Katie, in the center of this is standing with the captain, who's kind of like kneeling down to her level so that he can dance with her. And she looks up at him, and he's sliced right through the head, and you see the top of his head fall off. And it's just so brutal, and it's so gnarly. It gets called back to at least once later in the film, just because I'm sure they finished this and were like, good job, everybody. Let's make sure we use this again. But This is the scene. It's the one everybody remembers. It's the one that stands out. It's open and shut. This is the best scene in this movie. It feels backhanded because it is the first scene, but at the same time,
I'm willing to bet if you ask Steve Beck what scene he's most proud of in this movie, it's got to be this opening.
You would hope.
He's like, remember that guy I cut in half with a glass door in my last movie? I'm going to do that to 50 people.
He did a new commentary for the Shout Factory release of this in 2020, so I'm actually kind of curious to potentially hear what he's got to say about that
movie. Yeah, this scene's awesome. I love so much about it. First off, let me get this out of the way because I have to complain about this every time we bring up these type of scenes. That if you get sliced with something that is thicker than a laser, you're not going to remain together. That cable's like an inch
that would have knocked.
If that
would have knocked everybody over. At bare minimum, everyone is knocked over,
flying in opposite directions. But I forgive it because this visual is just too damn cool, and movies don't have to be realistic. Come on, that's boring. So the slow pieces falling apart, the things that aren't even like gory, things like the person holding a champagne glass and the glass breaks in two, that's cool. Because you're like,
yeah,
well, if that glass is sliced in half, so are all these people. And they have so many shots of people falling apart. They have like a couple dancing and the wife's legs fall apart and the man's still holding onto her upper body. And then both upper bodies fall. Or sometimes like it's focusing on one thing, but like in the background, out of focus, you see body parts or bodies separate into multiple pieces and fall to the ground. You mentioned her grandpa's head sliced in half. Gnarly. So it really runs the table from like full on gore, gross stuff to subtle stuff to just super creative stuff. I mean, they pack it all here in this scene. Going in this movie, I was pretty certain this would be my favorite scene. It's the one scene it's known for. It's the one I had seen. I remember liking it. But I remember this specifically, the slicing and falling apart being really cool. What I had totally forgot about was the sort of practical joke the opening is playing on you, where if you were to happen to maybe catch this movie on cable and not know what it was, the scene would come from absolutely out of nowhere. Because Francesca's song is the backdrop. It's the music. It's this beautiful song. It really like this ballroom dance, all this elegance, and the opening credits are in like a pink cursive font. It looks like an old drama or romance movie is what it looks like.
Yeah, like a golden age of Hollywood type thing. I
mean, the movie is called Ghost Ship, so when the title comes up, it says Ghost Ship, but it's written in this beautiful cursive font, as are the names. So, like, if you're watching this, don't know what it is, you might be
this
like,
summer,
kind of
stay in Marsh.
That's a weird name, but you would not see that thing.
You have no
coming,
idea.
So
yeah.
It makes it that much scarier. But I love the little almost bait and switch that they do. I mean, obviously you're seeing this in theaters, or you saw the cover. Like, it's not, no one's really fooled.
See evil, you're not shocked.
I still love them. Playing with expectations and tones like that. I just thought that was super, super creative. Yeah, the opening of this movie, absolutely fantastic. It's probably on YouTube. If you've never seen it, go watch it. But it's great. Yeah, best scene, hands down. It's awesome.
All right, folks. Thanks. Talk to you later.
There's other cool stuff in this movie. Hashtag PP though. God, it's a hard. How do you come back from this? This is like pitting the climax of every movie the first 20 minutes. It's an uphill battle after that. But I think it very smartly takes us time getting back to the horror. After this, we meet the team. We see them repairing a ship on their last job, then them getting this job and flying out, driving the ship out to it to meet it. So it's a long time before we get back to the spooky, because how could you follow this up immediately with anything scary? It's going to pale in comparison.
Yeah. There's a good 30 minutes of like just meeting our new cast, basically meeting everybody new that we got to get through in order to get to the next big thing, which it's tough. It's a tough climb back from that.
Even once they're on the ship, the scares are like just how poor of a condition the ship is in. It's like everything being rusted out, people falling through the floor.
Jesus.
And then sort of slowly, I yawned like 4 times. And then slowly the ghosts start coming out. Slowly they start, seeing the little girl in the corner of their eye, or hearing music and stuff. It slowly ramps back up to the full-on horror and ghost stuff, which I think is the right move. And then there's this crazy scene where like they open a hatch and it was full of water and like bodies just pour out of it, and we're back off to the races again. I thought that was also a pretty cool reveal where like we know there's ghosts and they're seeing ghosts. Like, are they gonna come across? Oh yeah, there's a ton of dead bodies on this ship.
Yeah, and that's kind of the question. Is like, do the dead bodies disappear? It's like the bodies of all the people from the original stuff aren't there. They don't really find any skeletons or anything from those people. So there was that question of like, are there any bodies here? And then yeah, very clearly there are bodies here. It was that scene in particular where they open up the door and water floods out and there's a whole bunch of bodies in it is definitely one that stuck out. I mentioned it talking about Karl Urban, but one of the other moments where things start going wrong is after their kind of salvage vessel blows up due to this manipulation by this unseen force, later revealed to be Jack Ferriman. It is they are on the ship and they're like they got to survive. They're looking for food. They find a whole bunch of canned goods, non-perishables, and so it's Karl Urban and Ron Eldard that are sitting there kind of going backward. They're like daring each other to eat the food. And like finally he digs into this one thing. He's like, hey, this is actually pretty good. And they start eating this food. They're going back and forth. They're having a grand old time. And then, like even just mentioning it makes me want to like gag and throw up. But like,
so we see them eating beans, eating mouthfuls of beans is what we see.
Yeah. But then there's another thing that's like rice or something. I don't know exactly what it's supposed to be, but yeah, it's maggots. God, that's so. Just the vision of it. I genuinely like. I feel the gag coming like in my throat. Like I feel it just because it's so gross. But like
he looks down and sees the can is filled with maggots, which of course means they have maggots in their mouths. And they literally. I thought the reaction, it gets gross, but the reaction was funny because he seems like a little kid eating broccoli. He's like, ew, as these maggots like pour out of his mouth.
Oh god, so gross, so uncomfortable.
Remember when John Leguizamo actually ate maggots on the set of Spawn for that scene?
Oh man, don't make me think of that.
Remember that?
Don't make me think of that.
It's like episode 12.
God, Jesus. Oh man, people have done some weird stuff. Kids, don't eat maggots. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's not necessary. It's just not going to end well for anyone. Don't do it.
Aside from the opening, these are my favorite scenes in the movie where they're playing with like the reality of what the characters see. The maggot scene is very memorable. And then when the character of Greer is walking through the main ballroom, and it's this, it's dilapidated ship, but then the camera like spins around him and slowly it transforms back into like its glory with all the people, then Francesca and stuff, which they say is apparently like the most complicated special effects shot in the movie, but they pull it off fantastically. It looks awesome. It's like, it goes from like an old ship to like the end of Titanic, or like this, glorious filled ballroom and stuff. Very cool visual, and then starts dancing with Francesca, and this leads to a wild scene where he says out loud, he's like, "Well, I know you're not real," and the line he's at the beginning, "You can't cheat on your wife with a dead girl," which I don't.
I like how Francesca acknowledges that. She like literally like nods after he says that. Like, yeah,
yeah, I'm dead. Let's do it. But she just lures him through the ship. Like he's just slowly walking after, like, "Hey, where you going?" And she takes her clothes off as she's walking away, and then she stops in a doorway. Let's say, just naked, standing in a doorway. Greer walks up behind her. And he tries to hump her and falls through her because she's a ghost, but she's not standing in front of a doorway. She's standing in front of an elevator shaft. The man was so horny that he tried to fuck a ghost and he fell down an elevator shaft. Just the she doesn't trick him. He knows it's an elevator shaft. Like, even if she was alive, she's just a woman standing in front of an elevator shaft, and he leans into her. Like, best case scenario, they both fall down the shaft and die.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no good answers here, folks.
He didn't make her imagine the elevator was there. He didn't make her imagine there was a floor. All she had to do was take her ghost clothes off and be a naked ghost and led that man to his death, which, I get it.
Nice work if you can get it. I don't know. Like, I don't know. Like, it's like, imagine being that guy. It's like, so for the scenes today, you are following a naked woman around a dilapidated ship. Oh no, I'm devastated. Yeah, it's obviously memorable for everybody, all boys of a certain age, but it ends up being pretty brutal because, like you said, he just falls through and dies. And then, like you said, this leading ultimately to her revealed death later, because like she is performing during the intro scene, but we later find out that she doesn't die in that scene. She is not one of the casualties in that scene, because what we ultimately find out, you mentioned it, is that this is all just a ploy by this Jack fellow to basically gain souls. Works for the devil or a demon or something. It's kind of, they play fast and loose with that piece of it. But you basically find out that this gold they find on the ship has caused essentially everywhere that it goes, everybody just devolves into madness, basically. It turns into like a Lord of the Flies situation. Everybody is like, we got to kill everybody else so that we can get the gold. And then the group that's left all turn on each other, basically. All leading to eventually everybody killing everybody. Largely. Or in the case of what happens now, these people, the ghosts kill the people. The evil ghosts, at least. And so you end up with this big scene later where we have flashbacks to that original cable cutting scene that's now interspersed with other stuff of like the chefs poisoning people with certain food, like potentially putting the maggots in people's food. You have people just killing and shooting people, and then when you have the mutiny, basically, this is when you actually see Francesca's death, and it's pretty gnarly because she kind of goes up to, she's basically like the last woman standing. It kind of seems like, basically, she kind of gets to the point with like the final like captain or kind of final bad guy of the scenario, and she kills him. And then she turns around and Jack is revealed. It's eventually revealed that this kind of mastermind of all this is Jack. And he literally uses a hook to hang her by her jaw, basically. And then like imprints like a symbol on her hand. That seemed weird because it comes back and means nothing later. Well, like it's not like a clue was given about it.
If I had to guess, like we see a lot of ghosts
marking her for like marking her soul or something. I don't know.
Well, she's helping him now because she's killing people. So she's like,
but everybody was helping him. Like,
well, not
like
the little girl, the ghost girl.
Well,
the captain.
I meant like all of the bad guys that were like.
I mean, in
turned
death,
on the crew,
as a ghost, she is now helping him.
Ah, okay, yeah.
So I that's all I can figure that thing means.
All right, better than it's fine.
It's something.
Anyway, yeah. So the scene of her death is pretty brutal too. But yeah, so she manages to be a part of several, possibly of the most memorable scenes in this movie. So, thumbs up.
Now, I honestly have mixed feelings about the final act of this movie. So much was revealed so fast. There's like not just the ship we saw in the beginning, but like another ship where they picked people up from that had the gold, and then like after it's really convoluted and told really fast, like the history of the ship and the gold and all the people. So it can be a lot to keep up with, and a lot of it seems kind of unnecessary. However, what I really like about is the scenes we're just talking about where we see the flashback to what happened. That's all shot and done really cool. It looks great. It's a cool visual. It's fun. Like I said, you see the crew like responsible for overthrowing everybody, and they're all wearing their like waiter. What do you call that? They all look like bellhops. Like they're all wearing their uniforms. And this group of guys, they're like all celebrating in the gold, and then one of them steps out of the room and just unloads a gun into the rest of them and kills them all. And he walks over and kisses Francesca, and you realize, oh, they're on this together. and then Francesca pulls out a gun and shoots him in the head. It's basically the Dark Knight, like the opening bank heist where
everybody turns on everybody.
Exactly. Until like one person's left with all the fortune.
I kill the bus driver.
I kill the lounge singer. That's what Jack does. I love that kill with the hook because like it swings in, it kills her, and for a while you get like the less is more thing. You just see her feet swinging back and forth, and like, all right, well I know what happened. That's pretty brutal. But then they show it, like they show that hook going through her jaw. So cool. It's some gnarly. Great makeup, great visual. Good stuff, Andrew. And then we get this final cliffhanger. So, Maureen has long since decided she doesn't care about the gold. She just wants to get out of there alive. And it eventually comes down to her and Jack. And Jack tries like emotionally manipulating her by appearing as other people, does everything he can until eventually she's gonna blow up the ship to sink it. And in the end, let's just say she gets rescued. Jack is left behind. She gets rescued. We see her like with the paramedics on a different ship. And she's like in the back of an ambulance.
She's on like they're on like the shore. This is like a dock. This is not like another ship.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And they're unloading the boat though. The ship made it back to shore, and you see people like carrying gold off the ship, then onto the ship.
They're going up the ramp onto. So they're putting the gold onto a new ship.
But she's on shore?
So she got rescued. Whoever rescued her also grabbed the gold, seemingly. And now she is being sent to the hospital, and that gold is being loaded onto another ship for seemingly the cycle to continue.
I'm glad we're cleaning this up, because none of it matters. What matters is she sees Jack as one of these people carrying the gold. So she realizes he's still alive. He's going to keep doing his thing. And Mudvayne starts playing really loud because this movie came out in 2002. This heavy nu metal song going into the credits.
Heck yeah, man.
Isn't on the soundtrack, but they got to use the song in the credits. So,
do you know what the song that the mechanic is listening to when he cranks up the music on the bridge that one time?
What is it?
It's another heavy metal it's another nu metal song. I just don't know what it's called. I was just curious if you were recognizing it.
I don't know. I'll have to get music from and inspired by Ghost Ship and find out.
Music from and inspired by. Chris, what is music? Is music the format or is music the thing?
Andrew.
Like an album. Is like an album a thing, or is an album? I don't know. We're not doing this. We're not doing it.
An album is a collection of songs that are released on one album.
One what?
A collection of songs with one. It's an album.
Yeah, but an album is also a physical thing.
What, like a vinyl? Like a vinyl album? That's just a format.
Like a vinyl is an album. So the album is all things.
But when I bought CDs, I also bought albums. I'd call it an album. Albums come in different formats. Vinyl's the format.
An album is all things.
All right, Andrew. This movie was pretty fun. That opening scene rules. Yeah. I had a good time. I'm glad I finally saw it.
Agreed. Yeah. Even if you just want to watch the first 5 minutes, folks, it is worth doing.
Andrew, we have just one movie left in Ghost Month, but I think it's safe to say the horror films are over. We're not covering a horror movie next week, right? You wouldn't, by no stretch of the imagination, consider it horror?
There are fans amongst the fandom that would probably try to say that there's horror aspects, but no. Ghostbusters 2 is not comedy. Or not a horror, it's comedy.
Okay, yeah. Ghostbusters 2 next week, which, before we hit record, Andrew, I was asking about Ghostbusters 2. I know I'm familiar with the elements of this movie. I know I've seen scenes and images. Andrew, I don't know if I've ever watched Ghostbusters 2. This might be my first time watching this movie. I'll be able to confirm next week when we sit down and talk about it.
Cool. I could literally record this episode right now. I've seen it so many times. So we're about as far apart on that movie as we possibly can be. So, like, I literally probably know what my favorite scene is, and I definitely know who my Mark Strong is already. So,
I mean,
tune
you're
in next week, folks.
certainly the biggest Ghostbusters fan that I know of. It'll be fun to talk about. We'll dive into it.
It will. We've never
Next
really...
week.
We've never really had a Ghostbusters conversation, so that's not true. We've absolutely had Ghostbusters conversations.
We literally
times.
recorded an entire episode about Ghostbusters 2016. Andrew, we've talked a lot about Ghostbusters.
Well, we're about to talk a lot more. So
that's next week, though. For now, it's time for our question of the week. And if you would like to leave us a question for a future episode, guess what? You can do exactly that by hopping into our Discord server. If you have not joined us already, what are you waiting for? There's a link to the server in your show notes. Just go ahead and click on the show notes on whatever podcast catcher you're listening to us on. Even if it's Sirius XM app, you can still get to our show notes. Click on the link, come and join us. Hop into that question of the week channel and leave a question, just like Garofals has done. And here's what they had to say. I was listening to a song from the way back for me and thought this might be fun. What is the top 5 albums you can remember listening to constantly or on repeat while in high school? I know we're similar ages, so unless you had the money for an early MP3 player or iPod, you were listening to music via CD players and whole single CDs with a single CD at your fingertips. And likely you didn't carry around other CDs to change to while at school. What album did you listen to for the day or week if you were lazy? My top 5 I can recall in no order of frequency or rank. Should I read off his 5 now, or do we need to get to discussion without being tainted?
You can just start with his list. That works.
Okay. Here's what we got: All the Right Reasons by Nickelback, The Black Album by Metallica, Meteora by Linkin Park, We Are Not Alone, Breaking Benjamin, Leave a Whisper, Shinedown. I mean, that's 2000s, right? He's got the right decade for when I was in high school for sure. 5 is going to be hard for me. I'm going to be able to rattle off a lot of CDs. But Andrew, do you have any that are springing to mind, top of mind for you right now?
I have 3 that come to mind. 3 that come to mind. And they're probably surprising. The first is Vault by Def Leppard.
That's surprising. Yes,
it was a greatest hits compilation of sorts. That basically, I remember getting it for like an orchestra Secret Santa one year because I knew those like 3 Def Leppard songs, and I just listened to that whole thing. And so there are Def Leppard songs that are like buried deep in the recesses of my brain that I haven't listened to in years. That if I heard them, I would immediately recognize them. And Chris, here's a joke for you. What has 9 arms and sucks?
Def Leppard? That's pretty
no. So I've never hated Def Leppard. I've always kind of like this, and they got some gems. Like, you can't deny it. Like,
I've seen them live. I saw them at the rodeo here in Texas. I mean, long time ago.
Such an odd statement when you really say it out loud like that. So.
I mean, it sounds normal to me and you, but for some people listening to them.
Another one was Greatest Hits by Journey.
Okay.
This was another, I bought it because, I knew those 3 Journey songs, and then bought this and was suddenly like, hey, again, some jams there. The other one that immediately comes to mind, oddly, is the soundtrack to Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Really?
This is because I loved that movie as a kid. I thought it was great, and I bought the soundtrack, and I think I've mentioned this before that, like, I think that soundtrack's really, really awesome, but, like, nobody on it ever went on to any real semblance of fame. Like, the sequel soundtrack has, like, Megadeth and Faith No More and Primus and Steve Vai and a bunch of people like that on it, but the first one, like, it's got people like Shark Island and Robbie Robb and Bricklin, and, like, you don't know who any of those people are, Chris.
No,
you have no idea.
I love the name Shark Island, though.
Yeah, it's so it's just it was just an odd thing because I remember watching the movie and being like, man, these are some great songs, and then not much came of it later. Obviously Pink Floyd enters the conversation later in high school. Probably towards the end, that's when something like Dark Side of the Moon would have taken hold and been a major factor. So it got Got to shout out the Floyd because they became my favorite band probably late in high school, and I annoyed everybody for years by only listening to Pink Floyd, really. So yeah, that's 4. If I had to pick 5, it's probably something by Kiss, because my dad was a big fan. So some hair metal thing that my dad, I guess Def Leppard's sort of hair metal, but some Kiss, Twisted Sister, Quiet Riot thing, something like that. Stuff like Rush, Iron Maiden, oddly don't come until much later, but yeah, there you go.
All right. I can really rattle some off here. So, movies I really got into in high school. Music I was already pretty into from middle school, going in high school, but it certainly didn't slow down. I mean, this was peak. I had a job now. All my money went to CDs and movies. I had a hell of a CD collection. Still do. I never got rid of them. I have a dedicated CD stand in my living room. Haven't spun one of those things in, I could not tell you how long, but I am not getting rid of my CDs. I'll post a picture in the Discord. In high school, what am I listening to? All right, rattle feel off here. Grace by Jeff Buckley. Greatest album ever made. Still my personal favorite. I think I was in high school when I discovered it. That's got to be one of the ones I've listened to the most in my life, certainly in high school. Butch Walker, who is like my favorite living artist, got into in high school. His albums Letters or Let's Go Out Tonight, Sycamore Meadows, somewhere in that run I get into in high school. All great albums, check them out. Lit, been one of my favorite bands since I was, I don't know, 4th grade. So their self-titled albums coming out around this time. I listened to a hell of a lot of that. Everclear, one of my favorite bands. Our Lady Peace I get into in high school. By the time I discover Our Lady Peace, they have like 4 Canadian albums that I get into. So I'm listening to like their entire discography, no one album in particular. What else taking me back to high school? Stroke 9. Listen to a lot of Stroke 9.
That is a name I have not heard of in a long time.
Mm-hmm. They had, even their hit is like a minor hit, Little Black Backpack. Some people don't even like remember that song. So that album, Nasty Little Thoughts, and the follow-up, Rip It Off. Listen to both of those a ton. Cheap Trick I get into in high school. You've mentioned some greatest hits. My first Cheap Trick album was the Authorized Greatest Hits. I listened to the hell out of that.
Great album.
It's great. It's awesome. But I, would go on to listen to their actual albums after that. One of my favorite bands. I don't know which of these I've just read off for top 5. The top 5 is probably in there. There's plenty more. This is peak. I mean, Groffles mentioned Linkin Park. I'll certainly listen to some Linkin Park at the time. We have another comment in the Discord. This is from Jesse Anderson in response to that. They say, Hybrid Theory by Linkin Park. 2 Lefts Don't Make a Right, but 3 Do by Relient K. Every Man for Himself by Hoobastank, and Greatest Hits of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And then the last one they list, they say, a couple life in prison sentences worth of LimeWire downloaded mix CDs. Love that answer. We all had a few of those. What I'm liking here is how many of these are like bands of the time and then a 70s or 80s band's greatest hits. Which is very cool. High school is the time to do that, right? You're like, oh, I've heard a few songs from them. I want to get into them. I'll just get the greatest hits. And then like the greatest hits album becomes like your favorite album or your go-to album for that band. It's pretty funny, but cool. I mean, it's always cool to get into, explore those different decades.
It is. And like, obviously I like now it's stuff like King Crimson, Rush. Like if you ask me what my 5 kind of seminal albums were now, I would tell you my Jams playlist featuring over 1,000 songs. But
is that real? You have a playlist called Jams that's over 1,000 songs?
Yes.
Andrew, a serious question. What qualifies a song to make it to your Jams playlist? You hear it once, you like it, you add it, that's it?
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, okay.
So there's weird stuff, like the end credits song from Terrifier 3 just made it on there, because it's this really rad, like, synth thing with like super overdriven guitar melody on top of it, and I was like, I may not like this movie, but this slaps. This goes. And so I was like, all right. There's Chapel Roan on there. Got there's all sorts of stuff, man. There's whatever I feel
Okay.
like. Basically, if it's a song, and so like oddly, like there's not a lot of Pink Floyd on it because that's something I gotta like. Pink Floyd's like almost an album band where like you kind of gotta listen to the album. It's kind of tough to just listen to one song. But yeah, so it's a thing. It's exceedingly long. If I actually like started it start to finish, it's probably like a month long at this point. Terrible.
Going back to high school, I gotta throw it. Demon Days by Gorillaz and Idlewild by Outkast. Listen to the hell out of those in high school. I still prefer listening to music by the album. I mean, I do shuffles all the time and playlists, don't get me wrong. But my favorite way to digest music is by the album. I discover far less artists now than I did back in the day. But just since you're bringing up what you're listening to now, 10,000 Gex by the band 100 Gex has made its way to like one of my top 10 albums of all time. Came out last year. I would have listened to the hell out of this. Actually, in high school, I might have been too cool for it, but it's a 27-minute album. I listen to it 4 times a week. It is so good. I listen to it all the time. We talked about vinyls. I still buy vinyl albums. So like when I cook dinner, I usually put on a album, listen to it by the Rubberneck by Toadies. How to not say that? One of my favorite albums of all time.
I was definitely shocked there was no Toadies there, but didn't
listen to a lot of
Toadies.
Yeah.
But the whole conversation, you mentioned everybody's got like 170's greatest hits, and it does remind me of this joke that there's an episode of Alan Partridge, the character Steve Coogan plays, where he talks about, because he's a DJ, and so he's always talking about music, and somebody's like, "What's your favorite album by the Beatles?" And he goes, I think I'd have to say the best of the Beatles. That just to me like sums up so many people's experience with like older bands, where it's just like, man, what's your favorite Elton John album? Anthology. It's like, oh, okay. I guess.
And that's fine. It
is. There's nothing wrong. Like, there's a reason they're called. There's a reason that, like, there's this big, like, I remember when I was in high school, my friend was like, "Oh, what's your favorite Jimi Hendrix song?" I was like, "I don't know, Foxy Lady or something like that." And he's like, "Oh, it's so mainstream, man." And I was like, "Well, yeah, like it's a popular song for a reason." And he was just like, "What about?" And he would mention like "If 6 Were 9" or something, some of the weirder, more obscure stuff. And I was like, "Yeah, okay, like, all right, but like, there's a reason stuff gets like." There's this idea that I guess if it's popular, that means it's like the industry wanted it to be popular, and it's not actually popular. And I'm like,
I think that way of thinking has somewhat died off, or it seems like it was a big deal when we were younger, or maybe we're just older and we're not, kids are still.
I think, obviously there's this general spite towards the music industry now, where like people are like, there'd never be a band like Led Zeppelin today, and I was like, yeah, just like in the 1950s, there'd never have been a band like Led Zeppelin. Like, stuff changes, stuff ebbs, stuff flows, and yeah, it's all a bunch of suits making decisions, but that's life, man. And I say it like, people will say, movies were better back in the day. They'll talk about like the golden age of cinema in the 70s, when like the real like auteur era took off with like Michael Cimino, Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, those types. Or they'll talk about, the bands like Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath, these bands that like forced their way into stardom versus like, and I'm like, you got to understand that even with a lot of those bands that got popular in the 70s, it's because a record label liked them and decided to promote them. Like, you can't like there's a big piece of it that's still that, but there's just this idea that if it was older, it's therefore better, and just creates the notion that they don't make stuff now like they used to. And I'm like, no, the passage of time has just allowed you to forget all the junk that came out then too. You only remember the good stuff. You don't remember the bad stuff. Because trust me, there was not only great music being produced in the 1970s. There was plenty of junk filler pop music too. It just didn't survive the test of time. Just like plenty of stuff doesn't survive the test of time now.
The dollar section of your local vinyl record shop.
Yeah,
look at how many
you'll find plenty of stuff.
Never heard of. Yeah.
Yeah. It's in the delete bin of life next to Mahogany Rush. Not to be confused with Rush, Mahogany Rush. And yes, they're a real band, and that joke from Wayne's World is very true. But Yeah, but like same thing with movies. People will be like, there's not making any interesting movies today. And I'm like, no, there's tons of interesting movies today. You just need to go. Is it as easy to see them as it used to be? Maybe not. But like, are studios taking less risks? Yeah, possibly. But if you want good new movies, they're out there. And if you want good new music, it's out there. It is. And in this day and age of the internet, it's easier than ever to find. Put some effort in.
Well, look, we named at least 5 albums each. I want to hear about your albums, though. What were you listening to in high school, specifically on repeat? Let us know. In that Discord, we not only have a question of the week channel, we have a question of the week discussion channel for you to answer the question of the week. We want to hear what you have to say, so hop in there, let us know, and come back next week for Ghostbusters 2. And just remember that maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. Check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. You can follow him on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy, and check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That's the only way that we grow. Follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you.